right before I started doing the motorsport stuff, like I said, I had hit like an all-time low, as close as I've ever been to giving up on life, I would say. I screamed out for help through the VA. I got turned away. I called several civilian mental health places, and it was often 2 or 3 month, wait as a new patient. And I knew I didn't have that, I didn't have that time. It was very desperate. Luckily, a friend of mine contacted me about an organization called 220. They do a session it's a combination of what's called PRP, which is a tactical resiliency process, and EMP, which is a emotions management process. They combine those two processes to create one session that they do over the phone.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Tia May, who is a veteran who has combined her love for motorsports and her passion for helping others to build a brand that's raising awareness for veterans and mental health in an exciting way. Tia, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I appreciate you for having me. Anytime I have an opportunity to share my story and get the word out there is very helpful for me. So I appreciate it.
Of course. And I love connecting with people who are doing something in ways that are different than like your standard therapy mental health way. So like when I heard that you're doing something with motorsports and mental health, I'm like, man, that's like a huge demographic of people that I know that can speak to. I remember when I was active duty, there was a lot of people that were into cars and, car mods and motorsports, and you just don't hear about this a lot. So I'm really excited to hear more. But before we get into the episode today, if there's one word or a few words you could use to describe how you are feeling going into this recording, how would you describe that?
How I'm feeling?
Yes.
Excited.
Awesome.
And honestly, just blessed that I've made it to this point, I feel like.
Awesome. Yeah, we chatted a little bit before recording, and you said you've been doing this for over a decade. And so that's some dedication right there. I mean, it's a lot. It's taxing emotionally, mentally, just I think being in the mental health space in general. And so I wanted to applaud you, first of all, for staying at it for so long and for being passionate about something that can be really heavy at times. And so I'm going to pass the mic to you so that you can share more with the listeners just about who you are, how you got into this and what it is that you do. And I will just sit back and listen. Go for it.
All right. So yeah, I was in the military back in 2001 to 2004. Prior to the military, I had a pretty rough upbringing, had a lot of trauma that I brought with me. And I feel like the military just kind of impacted that and made it, even worse. I started out about 13 years ago as a professional artist. I guess I should say I was pretty much physically retired from the service because of what I have to say would be vaccine overdose. After my second round that I got before I went to Korea, I just immediately started having a lot of pain, joint pain. It got to the point where I was on crutches, like I could barely walk. And it's been that way since I was 19. So I think we're going on like 23 years. So I quit the workforce about 12 years ago because I just couldn't take it anymore. And, being in the military, I've always been a very active person, not one to sit around. So I had to find something I could do that wasn't physically demanding and keep myself busy. And so I took my art skills and used those to become kind of like a on the side professional artist for over a decade here in Nashville. Became very successful, even learned how to tattoo for a couple years. It's a big dream of mine to get into that field. Sadly, about 2 years into the tattooing, I lost the use of my hands for art. The dexterity in my hands and being it like my hands would go numb. They'd just be like extremely painful. And it was really hard for me to put that down. I mean, I've been an artist my whole life, and I'd say I went through about 2 months of complete depression because it was like I don't know, a big identity crisis, you would say, because that's all I had for that was all I'd ever done, and it made me really happy. I was really passionate about it, and I'd say that was a big trigger for me to start really pushing the mental health aspect of it. I started reaching out on social media to people, anybody that posted that they were having a hard time. I kind of did a peer counseling on Facebook. I've got thousands and thousands of messages that I've sent out to, to give people hope and just give them somebody to talk to. But in that time where I was trying to figure out what my next move was, I ended up going to the drag strip, and I hadn't been in a really long time. And it reminded me just how passionate I was about motorsports. I had actually been kind of a underground race car driver out on the streets in my 20s, and put that away because I started having kids, and I set it to the side, and I let the passion of my art kind of take over. And I don't know about you, but I have to have something that feeds my passion, that feeds my soul, or I just fall into like a really dark place. And so yeah, it was exciting to have that reignition, especially coming from such a low of losing the use of my hands. And I knew that, like, I drive, like I've pretty much always been able to drive. Even on my worst days, I can manage to do that. So I was like, this could be something that I could, use motorsports to promote mental health. And when I started going back to the track, I used my car. It had no modifications or anything. I met up with the TRSCCA. They do autocross events here in Middle Tennessee. And it was after that first time, I knew that that was absolutely the path that I wanted to take. My emotions were better. Everything was better. I felt more driven. I felt more focused. And I was like, wow, this isn't like a hobby thing. This is actually benefiting me and my mental health. And so how can I make it more accessible to other veterans that are probably struggling with their mental health? Because I know it's very expensive. Motorsports is probably one of the most expensive hobbies that you can get into, or professions. So that's how it started. That's kind of how it started. I did skip over, I believe it was right before I started doing the motorsport stuff. Like I said, I had hit like an all-time low, as close as I've ever been to giving up on life, I would say. I screamed out for help through the VA. I got turned away. I called several civilian mental health places, and it was often 2 or 3 month, wait as a new patient. And I knew I didn't have that, I didn't have that time. It was very desperate. Luckily, a friend of mine contacted me about an organization called 220. They do a session it's a combination of what's called PRP, which is a tactical readiness protocol or process. I'm sorry, tactical resiliency process, and EMP, which is a emotions management process. They combine those two processes to create one session that they do over the phone. It took me about an hour to do my session. And I'm not going to lie, I was kind of open-minded, but I really wasn't expecting a whole lot. I mean, I had 40 years of built-up trauma, nightmares almost every night from as long as I can remember, even in my childhood. I would usually only sleep maybe 1 to 2 hours a night if I slept at all. I was extremely on edge everywhere I went, always on the ready, like always expecting the worst to happen, and constantly like overthinking things, having racing, like really bad negative racing thoughts. I mean, my life was completely consumed with the state of my mental, like my mental health. And I was told that I would probably be tired after this session occurred, that I should allow myself to rest, that my brain needed to basically shut down and reset. And so I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Okay. Like I didn't really feel anything in the moment of, the session, but I'm going to tell you, like I laid down. She was right. I got extremely tired. I went to sleep and I stayed in bed, I would say, for almost 2 or 3 days where I didn't eat. I think I might have drank some water, but like if I woke up, I went right back to sleep within like a minute and woke up kind of in this daze, like, what has happened? And I'm not gonna lie, I would say the first 2 months after the session, I felt almost lethargic. Like I didn't have any energy. I didn't have any drive to like do anything. I just felt like just existing was enough. And so I actually called my coach from 22 and I was like, hey man, what did you do to me? Because I can't function like this. I got kids, I got all these like entrepreneurial things I'm trying to do. And she was like, look, she's like, you had, 40 years of trauma built up. Your body, your brain, everything, it needs time to rest. And, it's like this whole, you will feel better. She's like, give it time. You'll start to notice things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to trust you, But sure enough, yeah, I'd say after about 2 months, I started to notice that it just felt like it was easier to breathe. I can say that I've probably only had like 2 or 3 nightmares in the last 2 years, going from having them every single night after this session. I noticed pretty quickly going out to dinners, being out in public, going shopping, that I wasn't like constantly checking my back, and I was just enjoying myself and like in the moment. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this works. Like this really works. Like beyond words can express. If you or anybody else has ever been in that place where your brain is so dark that you just don't want to be here anymore, and then somebody turns the sun on inside of your head and everything is just brighter. For one, it's priceless. I mean, you can't pay for something like that. And the session is completely free for veterans and first responders and their immediate family members. So I would advise anybody, if you have just the least bit of anxiety or trauma, PTSD from your time in service or even stuff that happened before that, I would say reach out right away, because had I known, 20 years ago that I could do something like that, I would have done it in a heartbeat, because I spent a lot of time in a dark place because of that. And I give thanks to 22 for where I'm at now, because I would have, I know I wouldn't, for one, probably wouldn't be here. And two, I wouldn't have had the motivation and the confidence to do the things that I've done over the last 2 years. I mean, I literally, with almost no track experience, I just showed up one day, started racing. And then, I mean, within a couple months, I was getting known for being this amazing media person that's out videoing. I introduced myself to probably over 100 drivers in the last 2 years. I've ridden in countless amounts of cars out on the track, hundreds of hours of filming, and I believe I've partnered up with around 10 organizations at this point to help spread awareness. And this Saturday, I am actually doing something I've been talking about for quite a while. And I don't know if you've ever talked about something that you want to do, that you plan to do, that like you're really passionate. You're like, I need to make this happen. I started wondering if it was going to happen, just because, like I said, it's expensive. Motorsports is kind of a hard niche to get your name into and stuff like that. But this Saturday, Slush Motorsports Festival has donated a vendor spot for me. I have received almost $1,000 in donations to pay for 4 veterans and their family members to come out and experience the Motorsports Festival, to get a behind the scenes look, introductions to drivers, and to go on ride alongs in drift cars. We're giving them lunch. I've got Dunkin' Donuts has donated coffee and donuts for the morning. And I've actually had 2 golf carts donated so that we can make it around the track all day. Something I just never even imagined being able to throw all this together. But the connections I've made over the last 2 years have really, really shown out. And it's amazing to finally see it come into fruition.
So for anyone listening to this episode when it releases, this will have been in the past. So Tia, if you could just let everyone know the actual date of this just for reference, and then I'll have stuff posted on our social media regardless, but
Okay. Yeah.
the date.
Yeah. We'll be out at the Nashville Super Speedway on October 12th for Slush Motorsports Festival.
Awesome. Thank you. Continue with where you're going.
Oh, yeah, you're good. So I've called it Veterans VIP Experience. And I have gone through, I'm one of those people, I'm over the top. I have to add like 8 million different little details and stuff like that. But it's all coming together. I'm super excited. I don't know about you, but I always get nerves. I think I have 5 or 6 media people that are going to be coming out to get video and pictures. So basically going to have my own paparazzi follow me around all day. So it makes me a little nervous. I'm used to being behind the camera. So when I see the cameras in front of me, I'm just like, whoa, what's going on? No, I'm trying to think. Let's see. Do you have any questions?
I do actually.
Okay, go for it.
The session that you said you did, can you
Yeah.
elaborate more on what that entails?
Sure. So basically, the best part about the session is you do not discuss any details of anything that you've been through. So that's a big thing that a lot of people avoid getting help, is because they don't want to rehash the things they've been through and they don't want to relive it. And you oftentimes get so triggered that you could almost be worse afterwards. And so that's my favorite part about the session. You are kind of guided through what I want to say is like a visualization. So for me, and I think everybody's a little different, but for me, I was visualizing, part of it was visualizing going up into a hot air balloon. Your eyes are closed and you're visualizing, and the coach is talking to you through a video chat so they can see your breathing and your body language, throughout the session. And so you go up, and like, she's like, you're going up and up and up, and just imagine that you're going like so far away, like you're away, far away from everything. And you would take all the things that are weighing you down, all of these, traumatic events, everything that is just something that you really need to let go of, and you put it on a piece of paper. Each one is, on the piece of paper. And once you get to a place where you feel you're completely isolated, you're out and you're free, then you take a moment to just kind of breathe and relax and gain your composure. And then she said, just I want you to just start throwing them out of the hot air balloon. Get rid of all of those things, put it away, get it up, get it gone, and let me know when you're done. I was like, okay, it's kind of silly, but okay, I'm tossing these tossing these papers out. And then she brought me back down. And there's moments where I got, I guess, a little bit anxious in the process. And anytime you get anxious, if you start to get emotional or you start to breathe faster, or you get a little uncomfortable, then you take a moment to, again, close your eyes, do just a very slow breathing, and just take a moment until you become calm again. You can't move forward if you're triggered or if you're excited. You have to stay in a very like comforted state. Another part of the session was sitting on a couch watching a movie screen and visualizing like the best, like an image that makes me that comforts me, in a place that comforts me, and watching it on the it's so weird. Watch it. So you're imagining that you're watching yourself watch the movie. So you're not picturing the screen, you're picturing yourself watching the screen. Just very simple stuff. Like you're not being asked, like I said, you're not being asked any details. I think there was a time, like a time period, what would you call it? Oh, like a time scale. You know what I'm
Oh
talking
yeah,
about?
like
A
a
timeline.
timeline.
Yes, so
Yeah.
you're going through a timeline. And since for me, some people may only have like a couple of certain triggering things that they have to focus on during this session. And since I told her, I was like, my whole, like almost the whole first 40 years of my life was just so much had happened. I don't know how I'm supposed to like focus on one, these things. And so for me, she kind of told me just as a timeline going from your earliest memory to current. And the only time that I like actually try to recollect anything was very fast. She basically told me to think about my entire life as if it was on a movie and it was going in fast forward. So you never have enough time to really sit in any one thing. And then I was asked to give emotions that I had felt. So maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear, sadness, those kinds of things. And we would kind of go through the timeline, and I would just say the emotion that I was feeling at those times. But yeah, overall, I think I got upset like 2 times, and then after that, I was completely calm. And one of my biggest triggers is actually my mom. Me and my mom had a very toxic relationship. And at the beginning of this session, I did tell her, like that my mom was a very big trigger of mine. And I got triggered. I mean, like literally just saying the word got me triggered to the point where I was like having to calm myself down and breathe and, take a minute. And then that was one thing I did notice at the end of the session. She asked me, she said, "So if you think about your mom, is that going to make you upset?" And I sat there for a second and I was like, no, like, so within that hour, something that had triggered me for 40 years was no longer a physical trigger. Like I still get sad about things that have happened, that's human. Like we have feelings and you don't want to be completely numb, but it's the fact that that stuff's it's not playing in my head 24/7. I can talk about my past. I can talk about all the things I've been through, and it's not taxing on me. Like I'm at peace with most everything. And if I ever come to realize that something has happened or I've been triggered by something, I can always call 220 and schedule another session because new things happen. Every year you go through things, and this isn't just a one-time thing. Like they're always there. So like, in 5 years, if something traumatic happens to me, one of the first things I will do is call them and be like, I really need to do a session because I don't want to be quoted on this, but I'm pretty sure it's the amygdala that sets the tone for your fight or flight response. And so basically the whole point of this session is to turn the switch off. Like, if as a child, if you are in a very traumatic state, your fight or flight response can be activated and never shut off unless you find a way to do that. And a lot of times talk therapy just isn't enough. I mean, I've been through talk therapy. I've been through medication. The VA actually tried to diagnose me as bipolar before I did the session. And I told them, I was like, I'm pretty sure a lot of this has to do with trauma. I mean, I've done a lot of reading. I have done so much research over the last 20 years. I could probably have a degree by now. I was right because after the session, what I say is I decompressed my trauma. All of those symptoms are gone. Like I haven't been on any mental health medication for over 2 years. And I don't feel like I need it at all. I do have a lot of like ADHD symptoms and recently started questioning the autism spectrum, and that was confirmed through a mental health facility outside of the VA because the VA would not listen to me. They don't really, from what I've experienced, they don't really deal a lot with any sort of spectrum issues with ADHD or autism.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I actually got in like it wasn't long ago that I actually went back to the VA because I went out into, we call it the community care program to get outside of the outside mental health help. And then the place that they referred me to, it wasn't working out. And so I was like, hey, maybe I want to try again. They put me back in the VA system. And I literally got so worked up, I started screaming. And I told the doctor that to tell somebody, like she basically told me that because I could paint, that I could put, that I could put my attention into painting, that there was no way that I could have any sort of spectrum disorder. Yeah. And I was like, that's you, are you even
What
a
about like
are you even a doctor? Like, do you know what
hyperfixation?
these
Yeah.
do you know what these things, like there's dopamine chasing, and
Yes.
the things that you're interested in, you can put, so I mean, I get in the zone. But if I'm not interested, it's almost like I can't force myself. Like, it's
Yes.
not like people are like, oh, you need to try harder. I'm like, no, I can't even force myself to go do it.
Yeah.
I mean, like the daily tasks at home, I struggle with every single day. And I'm always on the lookout for people giving like these hints and clues on here, this is how I do it, because I've tried every medication and none of it seems to help. So it's more of, you have to find a way to make it somewhat enjoyable. So, putting music on and having like a little dance party while you're folding laundry, whatever. But that's something, trauma seems to have a lot to do, especially young childhood trauma, with, the attention deficiency and stuff like that. And so I deal with it the best I can. But I'll tell you, motorsports is it for me. The faster I drive, the more clarity I gain. I have super hyper focus when I'm in the car. Like the minute I get to the track, honestly, my mind is on a one track mind of like, let's go fast.
Yeah.
And my reaction time is extremely, extremely quick. So I may not be able to pay attention to reading a book, but I can go around a track at like 120 and kill it. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you bring that up because there's kind of a couple thoughts that go through my mind. The first is that the more I talk to people about like very specific things when it comes to mental health on the veteran side, the more I realize how far behind our system is when it comes to all these different things. Like, I learned about eating disorders recently and how far behind the VA is on like even having anything to do with that. And then ADHD now and autism and all these things that I think are hot topics on the
yeah,
civilian side, but the VA is very far behind on it. And so when I did my CNP exam, compensation and pension for anyone listening, for my VA disability, they told me, or the individual that I spoke with, when I said, hey, I have some symptoms of ADHD, but have never really been, tested for it or anything like that. The first thing she said was, well, I think that may be related to trauma. And I've never really explored that. But when you say
oh,
like they don't
absolutely.
really have experts for this, I'm like, well, that would make sense because even at the VA that I would go to, they don't even really have one-on-one in person for like therapy for like PTSD. It's like group
Yeah,
stuff. So it's very, very far behind. And it's really disheartening to hear that because I think about how many people are misdiagnosed or just kind of thrown into something that's not a good fit. I think when it comes to talk therapy, you almost need that like very specific specialized care. Like on the physical side of things, if you had an ear, nose, and throat issue, you wouldn't go to your generalized doctor. You would go to an ENT specialist or like really anything physical, right? There's a specialist for everything. And there are specialists on the mental health side, but the VA is just not there. And a lot of communities, honestly, aren't even there with these specialized areas for mental health, which is, it's hard to even, approach people or have this discussion of like mental health and knowing that there's not solutions out there that are specialized for what people need. And that's probably why we are so far behind when it comes to mental health because people are getting misdiagnosed. I remember when I was active duty, I was diagnosed with adjustment disorder. And that's what a lot of people to this day are diagnosed with because it's the lowest level to still keep you active duty. And it checks the box, but it's not really helping people. And so it's something I think to be explored on the VA side of things and hopefully remedied in the future because that's really disheartening. But, when you talk about like having something to just like fixate on or something that just, I think when you talk about motorsports and what it does for you, it reminds me of like when I was younger, my thing was swimming. I was an athlete. And I just remember when I was doing that one thing, I didn't have any other thoughts. Like I didn't have to worry about the other things. And I think that's like the key point that really stands out to me is like finding something that maybe it doesn't cure everything for you, but if you can just have a couple hours every week or every day or whatever interval where you just don't have to think about other things because you are enjoying something. I think that is so, so important for the mental health of really everyone that's listening to this, like finding that one thing. And sometimes it is something new. Like you said, you didn't have all the experience and but you just started something and you found that you really enjoyed it. And like for you, that's like your break from the world, if I understand correctly what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I mean, even just like the moment I wake up to get ready to go to the track, just my everything is boosted. Like, and then once I get there, especially once we get in the car, there is, like you said, the entire world melts away. Your only thought is being on that track. I'm not thinking about my bills. I'm not thinking about my kids and the things that they need. I'm not thinking about, the fight that I had with my husband last week. I am in the moment, like, and with a spectrum disordered brain, it is so hard to be in the moment. If I'm out socializing, it's the noises of other people talking, it's glasses clanging, it's, the way somebody chews. I mean, like, all of it is just completely just taking over my brain. And so that is one of the biggest reliefs, is, like you said, to find something that makes everything else not exist. Like, I mean, every time I go driving, really, like, if I feel like I need to decompress, my big thing is I go take a drive. I go hit the back roads. I either put the windows down and just enjoy the quiet and like the outside sound, or I put on, my favorite music, and I don't think about anything else except for just pay attention to the road. Like that's it. And I know, everybody has something that brings them that. And it's just getting into it. And I think a lot of people fear starting something new. I don't have that problem. I don't know. I'm a cliff diver. I see something, I'm like, "Ooh," and I jump before I even know what it is. I'm like, "Ooh," and I just jump in and I ask questions later. And I mean, I've restarted so many times that it's just really not that big of a deal to me. Like at 19, I joined the military, and then after that, after I left the military, I just jumped into several different jobs just to see if there was, a certain thing that just really clicked for me. And then after, once I had to quit working, I was like, okay, I'll do this. And, I jumped into painting canvases and painting murals. And then I jumped into doing body paint, and I was doing music videos and photo shoots for magazines. And then got done with that and started doing tattooing. And my husband was like, "Are you ever going to stick to something?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I enjoy trying new things." But honestly, I think I'm really happy that I've got back into the motorsports stuff, because it's just not something. When I had all the art stuff, I was all over the place. I was like, I'm going to do photography, I'm going to do graphic design, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And with this, I'm like, I just need a car. I'm going to go race and I'm going to go drift. I have no desire to do anything else other than speaking. Like, I love talking to people. I love telling my story. I love sharing on social media and getting the response of, somebody who's in a really bad place and they reach out and they're like, "Man, your post, it hit so close to home, and I appreciate you for sharing that, because I couldn't share that, publicly, and it makes me feel less alone." And I mean, the conversations that are built off of that are amazing. And to see people bounce back once they find that, hey, there is somebody out here that can relate to me, and there is somebody that cares. I've seen so many people that have wrote me saying that they were at rock bottom, that they were ready to give up, and they really didn't know what to do. And all it took was me listening and letting them bounce ideas and, helping them find resources. And so many of those people are just flourishing now. And that's like the most rewarding thing. A lot of people ask me why I don't, I've never been big on chasing financial gain out of anything. Like, if I would have, I would have probably collected a decent living out of all of this. But the connection I get, whether it was with my art career or in the motorsports industry, the connection I get with the people is so much better than just being a business. we were talking about how the VA is so far behind, and honestly, it's on the civilian side too. And I think the money part of it, I don't know if you've looked into it or anything, but a lot of these, like, what do you call it? Like, what is it called when it, like, naturopaths, people that aren't really into Western medicine, there's alternative therapies that don't require medication, basically. Most of them don't take insurance and it's expensive. We recently looked into ketamine therapy, and places were charging like $3,000 for like 6 sessions. And I'm like, man, the people that are reaching out are like at their all-time low. And then it's like, oh, well, I could help you if you had a lot of money. And it's like, so I'm saying all this because I know it's a huge task, but for the last 15 years and all the research that I've done and all of like all the needs that I've had not be met over the last, over decade, has brought me to want to revolutionize the mental health industry. The way that people are diagnosed, just straight up out of the gate, like doing a decompression like I did with 22-0 would change so much. If somebody were able to decompress their trauma before they started trying to diagnose them. Because like I said, I was put on multiple medications that I did not need, and there's no telling the effects that those medications have on your brain when they're not meant for you. Like the bipolar meds made me like feel like I was schizophrenic. I was hearing things, I was seeing things, I was massively depressed and suicidal because of the medication. And the VA told me that I just needed to keep taking them longer. And I was like, nope. I was like, I don't think so. I was like, I'm going to advocate for myself right now and say that this is not right. Like, there's no way that this is beneficial to me. But yeah, it's awful. Like, it makes me so sad to know what's out there as far as help is concerned. And that's why I'm such a big advocate on sharing the 22-0, because especially for veterans and first responders, to know that there is something out there. They're not trying to put you on a medication, and it's going to help change the way your brain functions to where more than likely you might not even need any sort of medication. Your life be more manageable, your mood be better, like all of that without, for one, being charged buku money. And two, it's just, there's not a lot of time that it takes. Like I said, it only took me an hour and it changed my entire life. I mean, like I said, I went from, sitting at home and barely talking to anybody, barely pursuing anything, to now running my own motorsports program for veterans and trying to get funded for my own drift car so that I can be the one out there giving the rides to the veterans. Because like this year, I'll be kind of like a host. I'll be taking the veterans around to to the different places at the track and getting them into that experience. When hopefully next year I will have a host and they will be bringing veterans to me so they can introduce me and I can take them out on the track.
That's so cool. I love that. And I'm so excited that you are at the point where you're getting to see like the fruitions of all your hard work. I mean, obviously you've seen bits and pieces the entire time you've been doing this. Otherwise you wouldn't continue doing it. But
Yeah.
just to see like that big thing come to fruition and then to know that it's going to continue is like so exciting. And I think even for me as a mental health advocate, seeing other mental health advocates like hit those like major milestones is really encouraging for me too, because like I said very early on in this episode, doing this work in the mental health space it can be a lot sometimes. I think that's just the reality of it. Like those moments when we have someone reach out and say, hey, thank you, you helped me, or you get to see something really cool happen that's going to help the people around you. Like I too am driven by impact and by helping people more than the financial side of things. And so getting those, like, I guess you call it dopamine hits of like impact and like really seeing what you're doing, helping people is like absolutely huge. So I love that for you. And I'm so excited for you. Kind of a little off, but still on top of what we were talking about. I recently attended this VA symposium type thing that was about mental health. And, when you talk about how there is holistic options out there, but that's not really what the VA is pushing. And this isn't to like knock the VA at all. Like the VA has done a lot for a lot of people, but when we talk about mental health, everyone knows mental health is behind on all sides of things. And I was really disappointed to hear that like a lot of the discussion was around medication, and what I felt was like a lot of big pharma talk, and instead of like, hey, let's talk about what we can do on a holistic side of things, because I on this podcast meet so many people who have done other holistic options, and sometimes there is a combo of medication and holistic. But I think if you look at what medication was intended to be for, a lot, not all, but a lot of medications were intended to be temporary things to
Yeah.
help get people to the point where, okay, now we are able to thrive on our own without this dependency on medication. And so I I think that there's a time and place for Western medicine and for pills, but I also think that there's a lot of people who don't want the pills and they don't want to explore those options. They want something else. And I would love to see a world where the VA is offering multitudes of options for veterans, and they say, hey, pick what you want. Like, do you want to go a
Yeah.
more holistic route? That's just not the thing right now. And so
Which luckily they have started.
they have.
They've got like the chiropractic care, and I think they do acupuncture. Something that's really concerning for me though is they say that they offer neurofeedback or biofeedback on their website,
Mhm.
but I have been trying for the last 3 or 4 years to get in touch with somebody that would do it, because it's supposed to be extremely beneficial for your mood, for your concentration. I've talked with people that have facilitated it and seen huge strides in success with people in ADHD and autism, because basically it's like taking your brain to the gym.
Yeah.
You say like, you go to the gym to work your muscles and to make your muscles, work better and stuff like that. And that's basically what neurofeedback does. It can fix a lot of the neural pathways that have been damaged and rewire your brain to function more efficiently. And I can see where that would be extremely beneficial to myself, because like I said, like my depression stuff is not an issue. Now it's just the concentration and, the fact that so many little things get under my skin, just like certain sounds and stuff like that. And if I could only imagine if I could get myself, as an entrepreneur, especially, to be more organized and to be able to, function better, that would be life changing. Because like, we were talking earlier about, I've been doing social media for about 14, 15 years, something like that. And trying to juggle all of it for anybody it can be a full-time job. And
Yeah.
then you add in the fact that you have a brain that is bouncing, all over the place. It's like, I'll be really good at posting for like, a week or two, and then all of a sudden I'll just fall off. And that game, you can't be successful on social media if you're not consistent.
Yeah.
And with all the damage that's been done, over the years to my brain, I'm just not, and I'm very open with people about that. I'm like, look, I'm all over the place. I'm gonna do my best. I'm one person. I think a lot of people think that I have a whole team behind all the things that I do, because I'm not gonna lie, over the last 2 weeks, I mean, I've barely slept because almost into like an OCD mode of make checking all the boxes and, printing this off and making this flyer, making this banner, making this, and running through the entire day through my mind over and over and over, to the point where I am like, I'm exhausted, but I'm so excited, and it's one of those things they say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I'm exhausted, but I love it. Like, I love it so much. Like you said, the benefit of the impact that you have on other people. Like, am I looking forward to going back to the track and having a lot of fun? Absolutely. But the thing I look forward to the most on Saturday is the look on the veterans' faces, because none of them have ever been in a drift car before. They all, a lot of us are adrenaline driven. You don't go out and plan to shoot weapons and, possibly go to war without that without that desire to be in like a high adrenaline state. And so for me, when I left the military, I didn't realize that that was something that I needed. I think between my childhood and the military, my life was so high adrenaline all the time that once I came to like a normal life, just stay at home mom, cooking and cleaning and stuff like that, it almost felt like I was depressed, like it kind of like this low that I couldn't describe. And it was like I wasn't sad about anything. I just wasn't that motivated. I wasn't that excited about life. And finding the thing that you're missing it's so beneficial. If you can figure out, wait, why aren't you happy? What is it you love doing? Why aren't you doing the thing that you love doing? What's holding you back? And for most people, I would say their mental health is definitely holding them back.
Yeah.
To keep putting it off. I know a lot of people, especially men. I have a lot of male friends that I keep telling them, veteran buddies of mine. I'm like, if you go do this session, man, it'll help you, because they'll talk openly about like the anxiety and the PTSD and stuff like that, and they're just like, yeah, I've already talked to people, or I'm doing EMDR, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm telling, this is free, dude, and it only took me like an hour. Like, what do you have to lose? And so many people are so hesitant because it's new, and it's not your typical talk therapy. It's not the medication. A lot of people are like, oh, I probably need medication, and I'm like, decompress and then see how you feel, because like you were talking, I had been put on so many medications, and the fact that like when you go into the mental health world, whether it's on the civilian side or through the VA, they ask you what's going on. And without doing any sort of brain mapping, which is available, any sort of scans, any sort of, actual physical evidence, they're just like, okay, we're going to try you on this medication. It's this like chemical trial and error that you're putting your brain through, your brain and your body. And then people like me, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I can't even imagine trying another drug. Like, I have gone through so many. I've had really negative effects from almost all of them. So what's the other option? And that's why I was saying about wanting to change. And I don't know why it's been so difficult. Why in 2024 we have AI, we damn near have like robots that can run the world, but we don't have proper mental health care. It's just beyond me. In my opinion, mental health should be the number one priority, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And it affects everything. People want to talk about gun laws because of shootings, and it's like, well, almost all of these people that are in the news because doing these shootings have mental health problems. The kids in school are getting bullied, and the schools aren't really doing anything about it. And they might have a counselor, but is the counselor really, qualified to be really helping with mental health? In my opinion, you're told that you have to go to the doctor pretty much every year for your entire life from the time you're born. And you're not supposed to go to get your, mental health worked on until you basically have a breakdown. Like, to me, if a child, and I don't know why they separate mental health and physical health. I feel like they should be in the same building. And, when you do your yearly checkup, you should go get your mind checked, get your body checked, and make sure everything's good. And I feel like that would make such a big impact. And like I said, I don't understand why. I mean, I'm just an average Joe. I don't have a degree or anything. I feel like those people that do should have already figured this out. So since they haven't, it's going to be my mission to,
that's
like
awesome.
I said, raise awareness, and eventually, hopefully, raise funding. And my plan would be to start building mental health facilities. I've actually thought about having them like connected to the racetrack, and building like a whole kind of like retreat racetrack, mental health all in one, just to make it less scary. For some people, it could be like, hey, you're going to the racetrack. Yep. Yep. Go check in and go do your session. And then you can go do the racing and then you can go do this or whatever. And a lot of people will be like, you're so crazy. Like, where do you come up with these ideas? And I'm like, I'm just trying to put all these things that I think need to be better and just put them together. And to have that available in every, at least in every major city, and just completely give, especially veterans, a place to go that really, like you said, there's specialties that are needed. So if somebody has a spectrum disorder, to have a specialist that truly knows all of the ins and outs of those things and ways to help. There's not medication for autism. Like autism is not something you medicate. It's something that takes therapy and takes the reworking of how they go about their day. But to just make a better system and to make it available for everybody. I mean, the biggest thing is cost. If you don't have insurance, if you don't have money to pay for these people that don't take insurance, you just deal with it and you don't have access. And I believe, especially mental health, should be a guaranteed accessible thing. I believe the world will be a better place if everybody had access to quality mental health care. And it didn't take 2 or 3 months to get in to see somebody, because, telling somebody they need to go to the emergency room, and more than likely they're just going to, put you on a hold and take away all your belongings and seclude you from your family, which to me just sounds traumatic.
Yeah.
To have a place that's available 24/7, to take somebody in that knows how to do a trauma decompression, and to truly assess what's going on and have a lot more options. I don't want medication to be the first thing. I think it should be the opposite. I think you should do all of the non-medicated therapies, see if that works. And if that doesn't work, then go into, okay, well, maybe we need to work on a medication.
Yeah.
And there's DNA testing that can be done that will actually help tell you which ones may have a negative side effect, which would be great to avoid those things. And there's also brain mapping that is shown to be able to help providers see which direction they need to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like they do on the physical side of things, right? Like most doctors aren't starting you off with a narcotic because you come in with a headache. They're starting off with like, let's try some lifestyle changes, reduce caffeine, water. I think the roadmap is there, and we're not going to get down this rabbit hole, but I don't think that the experts don't know what needs to be done. I think that there's a lot more to it, but I love your ideas. I love your vision. I think that combining mental health with things that are a little less stigmatized, like a fun activity, like racing, like motorsports, I think that is a phenomenal idea. You say the funding piece is a big piece. It really is at the end of the day, because most people in like the medical field aren't thinking like, hey, let's put our mental health facility by a racetrack. But for the people that are doing the more holistic things or the fun things, that absolutely makes sense. And I think like, yeah, if you can combine two things to make it less scary, to decrease that stigma, why wouldn't we explore those options, or at least test it out and see how it works? And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the way that my brain works, if it helps one person, that's a success. Obviously, from a funding standpoint, for most people, there's more to it. But anyway, Tia, I wanted to ask you, where can we find you? Where can we support you? And how can we support you?
Well, Crazy Car Chick is my handle on all social media, and Chick is spelled CHIK. I'm on, like I said, I'm on all social media: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. I do my best. But the way you can support, all of my social media has my link tree. My link tree has my socials on it, but it also has the organizations that I'm partnered with, which is 220. They do the PTSD session. Veterans Trust, which they offer motorsports experiences for veterans. And one of the coolest things that they're doing right now, they just started a program where they are doing brain mapping while people are on a simulator, so they can see the effect of racing on mental health. So we could be, moving into a whole new eye-opening thing there.
That's incredible. I love hearing about all the different things that are going on, and I will make sure to link not only your socials, but your link tree and any other links that you want to send me that you think might be relevant in the show notes for anyone that wants to go follow. Please do follow. I always ask this on all my recordings with guests. Following on social media is free. Liking social media posts is free. And it does so much to support these people that are out here doing the hard work and doing the good work for our military and veteran community. So please make sure you go ahead and do that. And Tia, to end the episode today, first of all, thank you so much for all the value you shared and for just sharing the part of your life that has made such an impact in the world and in our veteran community. But are there any last words or pieces of advice, that you want to leave the listeners with today?
Well, my tagline is that be kind and never give up. And no matter what you're going through, it can get better. Tomorrow's worth fighting for. And if you need help, please reach out today.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.